The main character's name is Torino Kazuya. He's 26. He's an ordinary Japanese man. He's considered a joint office clerk, or at least he was. He's sitting in a sauna, enjoying the hot water on a dark night. A girl next to him gets your attention. She asks if anything will happen because they're there. The other girl with dark hair says she doesn't know why, but she feels calmer now. One with ears says I never would have imagined that heroes like them could relax like that. Another supports the comment and says it feels so pleasant. Here she turns to Kazuya, calling him darling. She hugs him and screams that she's decided she wants to be his wife. 3 girls start crying. One thanks Yuki, cleaning up the tears. Another says he's really grateful he took it. The third asks Yuki for forgiveness, saying he misunderstood. The hero himself wonders how a guy like him could get a chance to experience such pleasure. He conquered their hearts. It all started when the goddess Nara gave him the task of caring for this world. The goddess Neru created this world, balancing the flow of magic that circulates through it. If this circulation is stopped, the balance of the world will be compromised. Sooner or later, disasters will happen. If he can build a dungeon and create another magical flow to help in circulation, something like that. It was because he understands better what's happening than the people of this world that he was chosen. The center of the dungeon is 3 magical stones. He received the immortal body of an 18-year-old boy and several extremely useful abilities. Even though he quickly began to build the dungeon, there is a catch. The goddess extends something and says this is her first payment. He sees the dungeon credit card, which has 1,500 credit points. The goddess says hell need these points to buy new land. He asks, surprised, if he really needs to buy even more land. You're told you still have to pay for maintenance. It explains what points of experience can be used to summon monsters. With enough experience points he can buy anything, including food and furniture. He says she's going bankrupt. He's got less money than before. Kazuya asks how you can get more experience points. The goddess asks, what is the purpose of that dungeon? He answers with doubt that it is necessary to balance the circulation of the magical flow. That's right, in other words. It can attract the magical flow from outside of here and turn it into experience points. He wonders if it means that creatures born outside the dungeon will die upon entering. Or perhaps under certain conditions they continue to live for several years. The goddess says there's one more thing, but that's all basic. So she wishes you luck and disappears instantly. Kazuya thinks it might be easier to build an entire underground city. The dungeons are considered extremely dangerous. It seems unlikely that humans live there. Kazuya then shouts to the creatures that from now on they must become physically stronger. First, he must fight the invaders and focus on collecting experience points. So he decided to use them to summon monsters for work. Monsters fight. Kazuya yells at them to learn from their mistakes, to fight better. They must not lose to their past selves. As these guys have low intelligence, improving only physical strength is not enough, he says. He also tells them to learn basic knowledge, so they've grown incredibly in the last few days. During training, someone in panic screams for them to stop and stay still. The girls on the floor with the guards stop somewhere. A girl is not well, judging by her appearance. A knight turns to Lydia and says that this magical flow comes from underground. 2 girls are lying on the floor, exhausted and confused. The man smiles and says he just had an idea what to do. The eye that was watching them takes the information to the dungeon. Kazuya hears everything and sums it up by saying she discovered 5 invaders who entered the dungeon territory. He says 3 of them want to fight them, based on what they know. He asks to look at the information about them and consider that they are formidable enemies. The 2 weak girls are the former 3rd princess, and the other is the former 3rd princess's servant. Kazuya explains to her goblins that they are not equal. Kazuya says their mission has 2 objectives: destruction and security. He claims that protecting those two girls is target number 2. The first platoon will be responsible for this protection. Those 3 men will be target number 1. Kazuya adds that everyone must do their best to fulfill this task. The survivors will help others with their second goal. He yells that they're starting the operation and orders them to do it fast, because they, guys, are his proud warriors. Kazuya thinks to herself that she believes in their ability. 2 heroes. A nobleman from a ruined city, a princess and her servant. These royals are trouble. This is a good opportunity to teach you a lesson about the dungeon. He sees the men playing the girl. One of them asks the other not to be so rude. They're girls, after all. They should be happy to have a chance to become wives of goblins. By hearing this, Kazuya sighs and says she understands everything. These girls are captured. So these guys know she's a princess. They even take her back to the castle, which means they're not on the same side. He orders his men to start executing the plan. He tells them to get rid of one of them. All of a sudden, everyone starts to surround them. One of them panics and blames the other, because he said there were only a few of them there. Laia turns to Cass and asks if he can handle it. He asks for 20 seconds. He starts casting a spell against the goblins, but then he opens the door above them and slugs fall from there. They scream indignant about what this stench is. Kazuya orders the second platoon to take these girls to the base, and the rest remain alert and continue the mission. One of the victims is Elsa Lau Roshuru, the 3rd princess of the kingdom of Roshuru, one of the kingdoms that fight for these lands. In other words, she is responsible for governing her people. Since he was able to understand his situation, it was taught that the kingdom of Roshuru would bring peace to these lands. So she always wanted to do something for her people. Normally, nobles are never criticized for the war between the 2 kingdoms. One day, her servant Oriole told her it wasn't about criticism. It was about using your kind heart to gain people's trust. That's when she realized her purpose. One day, while using healing magic to heal your people, the goddess Lirishu has descended from the heavens. She watched her. The girl who always fought for her people gave him restoration skills and the talent of a wizard. She was very happy. He was very happy. She blessed everyone, gaining the reputation of a holy maiden. For the sake of his kingdom, for the sake of his people, he decided to work even harder than before. But it didn't last long, unfortunately. They visited a village of a rival kingdom. The strangers said the holy maiden could treat them as she wished. She believed your words without doubt. They decided they wouldn't interfere in the affairs of the village. Princess Elsa cried and asked someone to answer her. The servant held her and asked her to calm down. The unknown person says that, following his orders to avoid war between the 2 kingdoms, the inhabitants were sacrificed for a greater purpose, according to the plan. This place will become a neutral territory. Someone says she wouldn't expect anything less from someone of royal blood like her, so she has the potential to be a great leader. At this point, Elsa realizes everything and starts to wonder if it happened because of her order. She turns to Aurel, who, with a trembling voice, tells the princess she's sorry. She claims that they were used as a convenient excuse to take a village belonging to another kingdom. Elsa begins to tremble and examine the remains of the village. She can barely say that if they hadn't come, that village would be intact. She starts to cry bitterly. The mate tries to calm her down. A war broke out between the 2 kingdoms. Oro said it wasn't her fault. From afar, from the carriage, the princess sees some smoke coming from the flag. At this moment, Aurel realizes something and suddenly embraces the princess. They fall into the abyss, and the servant protects his mistress with the body. Aurel asks if she's hurt. She says she's sorry, things don't look good for them. Aurel starts telling the princess that he's really sorry. Elsa looks up and sees her leg hurt. She says she'll cure her, but then she loses consciousness. And it keeps rolling down the road, down the cliff. It falls directly into the hands of those thieving men. They then say with a smile, "Isn't that the Virgin Saint? They became servants." But maybe that's what she deserves. Returning to the present, Kazuya knocks on the door, opens it, and sees the formidable Oriol hugging his lady Elsa. Elsa starts screaming and asking what all that means. Oriol holds her again and asks her to calm down, however. Oriol starts moaning because of the injured leg. Elsa gets worried and asks her not to force herself too much. Kazuya rises and, angry, asks them to listen. He says he can cure both, but he wants them to follow him. They both listen carefully. Kazuya says it's okay if they refuse. He won't force them to be his servants, however. He has his reasons. He wants them not to be mindless servants, but people he can trust. Elsa says if he wants her to trust him, he should cure Oriol. Kazuya says she has to promise Oriol won't be able to attack him after she's healed. Elsa, in tears, cries out that she promises Oriol will not attack him. He says that's not gonna work, and that's not enough. Kazuya says she needs the protection installed. You both don't understand what he's talking about. The effect of this skill guarantees security. Actions that do not fit the established framework are limited. Hurting others is forbidden. Kazuya says there are other things, but for now, that's enough. Elsa asks if it's to ensure your safety. She thinks he has other goals. Kazuya giggles and says she's starting to understand what he's saying. He finally says openly that he wants cooperation with them. He won't tell you everything, but technically he wants to know more about this continent. He says he wants them to give him information from the perspective of a royal member, and that both can benefit from it. When he gets the information he needs, he'll return them to their kingdom. Elsa says hesitant she understands. She looks up and says she accepts his terms. She turns to Oriol and asks with hope if she agrees. She looks down and says if Elsa says so, then she agrees. Kazuya reaches out and says he will then use his ability. The forces are directed to the girls. When the necklaces break and fall, Elsa says he's happy he fell. She turns to Kazuya and says it's his turn now. She asks him to heal Oriol's wounds. He says he won't go back on his words. But he warns that this spell can only be used with the consent of both parties. Oriol screams that's not true, that he must be forgetting something. Elsa is surprised by this statement. He says, angry. Something like this happened, so Elsa bends to his feet and begs him to help her. Elsa, with her head down, asks for a new chance. Kazuya turns to Oriol and asks if she is seeing this. Even her princess bows. If she now accepts her terms, Oriol closes his teeth and says it's okay. She'll accept them, however, if he intends to hurt Elsa. She promises to kill him. Kazuya agrees and says she won't force them to do anything but those demands. He reaches out and announces that he will begin. He tells her to be ready. Now he uses his healing ability. He pronounces the advanced restoration spell. Oriol's surprised. Elsa is shocked because this is a very difficult healing ability. Is he really a healer master? Elsa immediately introduces herself to him and asks if she can know his name. Oriol examines your wound and moves freely. Kazuya was already heading out, but then he turns around and says it's his fault. He says his name is Yuki and that he is the master of the dungeon. Girls freeze with horror, saying and realizing he's the master of the dungeon. Oriol says, horrified, that's impossible. Elsa turns to Yuki and asks if he really is the master of the dungeon. Elsa asks if he really is the master of the dungeon. Yuki doesn't understand. But Elsa doesn't understand either. She doesn't really believe him. Oriel openly admits that's not exactly what they imagined a dungeon master should be. Yuki extends a certain stone and says that if they're still not sure who he is, then that's proof. It's the core of the dungeon. He says that through it, he's connected to this world. It seems even your life depends on it. He didn't realize it until the old owner gave him control of the dungeon. That's all he knows for now. He admits he has no idea about any other dungeon masters they're talking about. He doesn't understand. Elsa carefully asks again if it's really true, what he just said. He decided to get more information about this world with Elsa and her friend. If the dungeons are safe enough, they can become hunting or training camps for knights and hunters. If the level of magic increases, they become targets of conquest. People who run the dungeons are called dungeon masters. The caves where the dungeon masters live are guarded, and the level of that guard determines the degree of general danger of the dungeon. Heroes receive titles according to their abilities. Among them, the strongest are heroes of other worlds. Even he knows little about them. The description of the demon lord is rather vague, but that's what they call it. It has been confirmed that only 2 of them remain on this continent. Among the races, we can distinguish between beastmen, elves, and humans, and within the human race alone, there are even more ramifications. Yuki asks Elsa if she can tell you more about this continent. She answers, "Of course she can. They are now in the territory of Roshuri's kingdom." Roshuri is one of the 5 largest kingdoms on the continent. Elsa says she's his 3rd princess. Elsa told Yuki who she is, and the details of everything that happened before. Yuki, thoughtful, says you understand. So Elsa says she wants to ask you a favor. They ask him to punish the men who captured and enslaved them. They ask if he might consider executing them. Yuki says she understands their feelings. Oriel gets up and screams that he can't let someone who treated the princess so horribly get away with it, because of the restrictions. They can't punish them on their own. Yuki refuses, and says he still wants to hear what they have to say. The girls are surprised. Oriel shouts that talking to these barbarians would be a waste of time. Yuki is outraged and says that it is not appropriate for someone like Oriel, who solves all problems with force, to speak such things. Elsa agrees with her, and you say he shouldn't talk. Kazuya says tiredly that in this case, why don't they wait in the next room while he does that? He explains that if something bad happened, they could come and help. Elsa says she understands you. He goes out, then turns to them and says there's something I'd like to ask him about. He asks men why they want the princess to be their servant. Wouldn't it be easier to return her to the kingdom? So they would get fame and riches. One of the men starts by saying that everything is for the good of his daughter, his friends, the village, the city. He wanted revenge. He was a common adventurer. He didn't even realize how he became a city hero. He had good friends, his wife and daughter at his side. He says they're his treasure. I would never trade them for any national treasure in this world. A friend once asked him what would be best if he could also find a loving family. Reed replied with a smile that he was already engaged. He tells his friend Hez the son of a lord, so, in his opinion, he can choose who he wants as his wife. So your friend asks with a smile, "What about your daughter?" He screams mad that this would only happen over his dead body. One day, Roshu's soldiers arrived at the village where Leia and her beloved lived. As that army was accompanied by a holy maiden, he thought their purpose was only to offer help. But he was wrong. A month later, an army attacked them and launched a large-scale offensive against the city. Only they stayed. The few survivors and all living creatures in the area were destroyed. He starts sobbing and says that what was more precious than fame and money, his treasures, were all lost. Elsa hears all this and covers her mouth in horror. Leia concludes that this is how they decided to kidnap the princess and punish her in the most terrible way. Kazuo says he stopped them himself. Is that true? Read It says it's not like that. Thanks to him, he had time to think about everything. No matter what you do, nothing can be recovered. It's like a nightmare, even if he takes revenge. His wife and daughter will no longer be happy. After a sad silence, Leah asks if the princess really sent him here. They bow their heads and ask him to hurry and kill them. They don't want to do anything else that can piss off his family even more. They think the sooner he does this, the better for them. Kazuya turns to ask for help, and asks if she heard everything. She, completely horrified, replies she heard, read it, with a certain despair, that the executioner is the princess. Then Elsa approaches them and bows before them. She kneels at their feet and says, with a trembling voice, that she is terribly sorry. Reed observes in shock. Without understanding what is happening, Elsa cries bitterly and repeats that she is sorry, asking for their forgiveness. She doesn't understand why everything ended this way herself. Red if it rises suddenly, and asks Kazuya if he knows anything about it. Kazuya answers that she is not yet sure whether they have told the truth or not. He told them everything Elsa said. Their heads bowed in complete bitterness. Reed approaches Elsa, who is still bowed before them, and asks her to stand up. He tells her not to bow her head like that, because he doesn't deserve it. He's just a guy who completely messed up and acted like a bad person. Elsa raises her head and says, once again, between tears, that if she hadn't been there, his family wouldn't have been there. Read it says that, in her story, it seems that all the time they wanted to invade their lands, they were just using her as a tool. Besides, it's partly their fault, as he believes himself. Elsa swears on her life as a princess that she will not allow such tragedies to happen again. She'll do everything she can to stop this war. Then Kazuya talked to Mobu and his companions. He asked them to tell him what had happened to them, but they refused to tell him. They agreed to take care of the girls and buy him some things. Moreover, they also agreed to become their protectors. They say goodbye. The men say they still have some things to work out, so they split up here. Elsa thanks you for everything and accepts. She hopes they can meet again. Read it, says, you'll be able to see each other again when you get back to that dungeon. They leave, Elsa tells Oriol. They're heading back to the castle. So Elsa turns to her and says that from now on, they can fight on the battlefield alone. She asks if you'll accompany her. He holds his hand firmly and, with a smile, says that, of course, he will follow you wherever you go. The men arrive in the city, read if you are lazy, and call others to follow you. One stops him and asks if he didn't hear what Yuki said. Most likely there will be even more trouble now. Read the answer that you can see them again. That at least they should see what the royal castle looks like. He didn't say it was urgent. So he thinks he'd find a servant to do chores for him along the way. The other one is outraged by his behavior, and the third one just laughs. Says he hasn't changed a bit. Capricious as ever. The other laughs and says he is what he is. One invites the other to take a walk around town. Right now, a knight meets the girls in the palace and tells Elsa he's very happy. She's okay. They hug, Sister says when she saw the wreckage of the carriage. She thought she was dead. Oriel observes and says it makes sense that she's incredibly happy. The sister orders the servants to prepare and serve tea and Elsa's favorite sweets. It requires that the request be fulfilled quickly. Elsa tells her sister, I thought it was too much and you were embarrassed. She says it's not just for her, and she can't eat it all by herself. Oriel observes their conversation from afar, and at the same time remembers Yuki's words. He told you to listen carefully if you wanted to protect Elsa shares her assumptions. He said that in the worst case, there's someone in the royal palace who wants to get rid of Elsa, so she must always be on alert. The sisters have tea. She says it's delicious and asks Elsa to try it. She sits uncomfortable and asks her sister not to be so hasty. She tries and says the taste is a little unusual. Chai breathes with difficulty. Your hand starts shaking. She falls suddenly. Oriol runs to her, and a fat man comes out of nowhere and starts screaming. Sararia is breathing hard. and they're asking if she's okay. The man screams that it's too late. Sararia was injured by an intruder pretending to be Elsa. Elsa doesn't understand why Prime Minister Roval is there. Elsa shakes her sister, horrified. Oriol asks her to calm down. She says with her magic, everything will be fine. She remembers that and says she understands everything. They hear the minister screaming again, telling nobody to move. He claims Shez trying to kill Sararia. He orders the guards to immediately capture this lying princess. Sararia, in pain, tells them to run. Oriol listens. Oriol stands up, asking Elsa and Sararia for forgiveness in advance. She squirms and screams to be released, like little sister Chiss still hurt. She needs to save her. Oriol uses his magic to save his sister. They jump from the tower. What everyone else sees, including the men who are with Laya. One of them says it looks like she's carrying someone, which means they're okay now. Another one says he doesn't know yet. By the way, shouldn't they save them? Another says it seems Yuki's assumption was correct. What's even worse than being forgotten is when your own country is about to be taken. He says Elsa was sacrificed to diminish the reputation of the kingdom. The war will only continue if it is not saved. She says she's carrying someone, which means they're also involved if the Holy Maiden loses her good name. Moreover, all neighboring countries will eventually form an alliance against Russia, if that happens. The king may lose his influence. The people behind it will finally reveal themselves. The prime minister says the king is unreliable. Let them hear you. All he said were just assumptions. But they should be taken into consideration. Yuki told them they still didn't know who was behind all that. If he wanted to put his plans into action, it would be right after Elsa returned to the castle. Because he would think she was dead, they suspect it's someone of royal blood. Yuki said, if it was him, he would have killed one or two more people along with Elsa to hide his plan. One of the men didn't understand. If Yuki had discovered everything so well, why didn't you save her first? The other one asked him not to be stupid. He explains that the royal guards can't do anything. He believes things can get a lot worse. Oriel runs past them with the princesses. Men signal to run. Oriel thanks them for their help. The knights approach the men and ask if they saw a woman with two girls on her shoulders. The man voluntarily points to the side and says they ran that way. At this point, Yuki watches everything and says that's how they gather their forces. Behind him is a concerned Elsa. He asks what happened. She says they won't be able to do anything. These people are the main forces of the kingdom. They're the best in the country, she says, embarrassed. She doesn't mean that, though. Then the sister Chu interrupts her and shouts angry, asking if he understands the current situation. She yells at Yuki, saying he's gonna kill himself, her and Elsa too. Even if they follow him, if things continue like this, there is no hope. Yuki says, tired and emotionless, that then he has no choice. He thinks he'll choose Elsa as the new master of the dungeon. She doesn't understand. Yuki says, tired and emotionless, that then he has no choice. She asks what he's talking about. Isn't he the master of this dungeon now? Yuki says they don't know that. But if they find out about him now, everything will just get more complicated. If you're talking about negotiations, then Elsa can handle it. All she has to do is say that Sararia is alive and well. Wouldn't that solve everything? Elsa screams, horrified, that he's simply handing over his work to her like this. Sararia asks if it's possible that he wants Elsa to be his bait, as master of the dungeon. She knew from Elsa that he would die if the core of the dungeon was lost, so if Elsa died because of him, Shed spread the news all over the kingdom that the magical core of that dungeon was still functioning perfectly. Yuki says he's pretty sure it was the prime minister who deliberately allowed them to come over, so since they left the castle, they're as good as dead. Sararia says she doesn't care. It says in a threatening way that if Elsa dies, this whole world means nothing to her. She threatens to kill them both with her bare hands, including Roval. There's a silence, so Yuki starts laughing, which horrified Sararia. He asks for forgiveness and says she's right. Everything should be like this, or at least that's what he told Elsa. He says with a smile that it is true that without this core, the dungeon cannot exist, but he didn't say he didn't have a backup plan, and he also didn't say he was gonna run away and leave this dungeon. He shows the stone and adds that, although he has prepared a retreat route if necessary, everyone reacts with shock, and Yuki says he has not yet decided whether to go or not. Suddenly, a screen appears in front of soldiers, which scares them. Elsa appears on the screen and introduces herself to them. She says she expects everyone to hear what she has to say. The poisoning incident was just a misunderstanding. Elsa says with a smile that her sister is there with her now, alive and well. Sararia shows up and says Elsa will also confirm she's real. Sararia says she's alive, and she's real. Soldiers are informed that this whole chain of events has been staged to get rid of them, members of the royal family. A soldier, captain of the guard, Alex says they said what they wanted, and they listen carefully. However, there is still no conclusive evidence that the two are really princesses of the kingdom. The whole crowd supports him. Alex says they'll make the final decision themselves after examining both of them thoroughly. Elsa shouts that she will be grateful to them. Then she asks you, order your soldiers to retreat immediately. Sararia is furious, calling Alex stubborn. She turns to Yuki with displeasure and asks what he will do now. She screams that all this dungeon has only 3 newly built levels. She screams that they must hurry and escape. But in an instant, all the soldiers on the screen fall suddenly. The girls look in shock. The soldiers did not notice the sign asking them to walk this path carefully in groups of 6. Yuki says that even after he clearly wrote the rules before they entered, they still ignored them. Sararia screams that he can't lure people into traps like this. She asks how low he can get. Yuki asks what she means. Sararia asks him to at least fight fair. Yuki asks Ariel if there are no traps like this in other dungeons. She answers that there is actually. Yuki begins to think deeply. Sararia keeps screaming. She can't understand why he didn't have the courage to face them. Yuki then asks if it's fair to attack a newly created dungeon. Sararia screams furiously that they are 2 completely different things. Zoe stop changing the subject. Yuki turns to her and asks if there is a strategist or someone like her in the kingdom. Sararia doesn't understand anything and asks what a strategist is. Yuki explains that it is the person who manages the various strategies and formations during the battle. She says it's pretty pointless no matter how strong the troops are. It's impossible to win without a blessing. Yuki says a good strategist is able to make his army invincible in battle. But a great strategist is able to force the enemy to surrender before even the battle begins. Sararia doesn't understand and asks what he means. Yuki replies that in his country it is a famous saying. We need to think of a strategy to minimize losses among our soldiers. Sararia doesn't calm down and keeps screaming. What is he talking about? Because the enemy is already here. They don't have time to fight. Sararia then says there's no time to think about losses. She starts coughing, Yuki asks, but she still doesn't understand. Sararia says surprised they haven't lost a single soldier yet. They look at the screen. Yuki says they finally decided to read the rules. Soldiers advance further down the hall and find a monster. A blood minotaur of level 95. They begin to tremble with horror and fear. Sararia still understands and asks why he's not moving. Tell him to do something. Yuki says calmly that everything will happen in a second. He commands him to eliminate the remaining soldiers. In an instant, the ground under your feet disappears. Soldiers fall. Sararia starts shaking and then screams that this is another trick, since he has already decided to play dirty. Why not get rid of everyone at once? Yuki tells her to watch. Because the noise attracted another troop, Sararia asks if he was planning to attract another troop the whole time. He says if they had fought those guys, the others would have just backed back. He wants to force the soldiers to surrender. Elsa asks how they can force them to surrender. There are still 1,000 soldiers left. Yuki talks about digging a hole right down the road. Elsa says that then they will be completely isolated. Elsa doesn't understand why the soldiers would surrender to them in this case. Sararia asks Elsa what they need to survive. She happily asks if that's not food. Then comes the question, these guys have food with them now. The goal is to defeat them, including the Minotaur and the many traps in their dungeon. It would be questionable whether it is even possible to achieve a flawless victory without any loss. Yuki reports another team is en route. Yuki says joyfully that now all that remains is to wait until they start crawling on their knees before him, begging. Edi asking why he wants to force them to surrender. With this he can do whatever he wants with them. Yuki says he refuses to let precious lives be wasted before his eyes. Elsa gets carried away by her words. I'd call him a liar. Yuki says she's right, because he needs them for something else. They ask, and for what? Yuki says that no matter how you look at it, this plan turns out to be the most advantageous. First, he wants her kingdom to recognize her dungeon, and he, as the one to rule it, that's why he planned to ask Elsa to join the negotiations. But then she ended up involved in this mess. He told Elsa to go back to the dungeon, so he could take over and continue the negotiations. He felt that they could still resolve the situation peacefully if everything was cleared up. Sararia says she understands everything. She says when they come back, she promises to help him in any way possible. Yuki shows surprise and gratitude. He adds that even if the soldiers are on his side, there's something he can only ask Roval. Then Laya appears on the screen, greets, and says that, as Yuki said, he discovered the whole truth. The girls are surprised. Laya says that during her investigation, she found a girl. In front of him is a girl in glasses and a raincoat. Just before, this girl was surrounded by men. She tried to leave and said she was in a hurry, that it was very important. The men asked, with great enthusiasm, where she was going. Why didn't she just stay and have fun with them? At that moment, Laya interrupts them with a scream, ordering them to stop immediately. They turn around and wonder what the problem is. They start getting angry, screaming. Didn't they hear what they said? Is he deaf? They think this guy needs to learn a lesson. So he got rid of the men and turned to the girl, calling her a little girl. Where is she going? He adds that she looks very familiar. Ask if you've met before. The girl takes off her hood and says it came from the holy kingdom of Raitia. His name is Luria. His full name is Luria Ritia. She is the holy maiden of the kingdom of Ritia. Everyone recognized her immediately. Sararia realizes that Luria speaks in the past time and wonders what that means. Luria says sadly, that's what it is. She's not a holy virgin anymore. Yuki says with displeasure that now there are so many holy virgins. He asks, is this a job now? Elsa screams that this is not what should be said. He is incredibly rude to Luria. Sararia also shouts that Luria is an extraordinary and incredible figure in the world history of the Holy Maidens. Yuki says the story has now come up. Yuki says she's understood a few things, but could she explain it to them herself? Luria says, of course, she'll explain everything. She says all this happened because Raitia's holy kingdom wanted to get rid of Elsa. Elsa gets scared and asks again if you really should get rid of her. Sararia says that the decisive factor was that she received Lelisa's blessing. Luria claims that with the emergence of a new holy virgin, everything is fine, as long as it is a symbol of only one kingdom. But when his influence begins to spread to other countries, that is a terrible shame and a humiliation for Atari, one of the great kingdom. Upon hearing this, she immediately rushed to the castle and heard rumors about Elsa's abduction and Sararia's disappearance. She really didn't know what to do about it. Yuki concludes by saying that he then met Rowan, who managed to inform the king of everything. Rare says that's absolutely true. Yuki asks, if that's true, is it a good thing? Elsa says yes. She asks if everyone is there. Other figures appear behind Luria, whom she calls her father and sister. One presents itself. His name is Alia Las Roshuru. She would like to thank you all for taking care of your sisters. The man says it's the 6th Roshuru. Seraria is outraged that the old man is also there. Roshuru says his father was almost killed too. They all cover their mouths in shock, however. He was warned in advance, so now he's safe. The old man talks about the problem with the guards. He accepts Yuki's request, but has doubts and asks who he is. Yuki replies that he's just an ordinary poor guy who got involved in their mess and also the master of this dungeon. They start arguing about it. Yuki says it's okay if you don't believe him. He thinks everyone can relax now, but to take into account that he is not helping out of kindness, the old man laughs and says that although he speaks so frankly, he feels no hostility from them. Suddenly, he gets serious and asks the dungeon master what his true intentions are. Yuki says openly that he plans to rebuild the surrounding villages and cities, and that's why he wants people to stop being afraid of the place and continue living, negotiating, and doing business there. The old question may ask why he needs all this, so Yuki explains everything about experience, points to them. The old man says everything is clear to him. It will be much more profitable to turn this place into a peaceful residential area than a war zone, so after considering the consequences, he decided to choose this method. So, his situation isn't meaningless now. Yuki then replies that in the end, he managed to capture all his royal guards without any loss on either side. The old man is seriously surprised. Yuki says that no matter how you look, a victory like this is only possible in a legendary level dungeon like this. So there would be no more trouble if he returns all his troops to them safe and sound. Serario says that if the news of the total defeat of Fia spreads, Roshuru may return to be Raitia's primary target. Yuki answers that if that's the case, then kill wouldn't Elsa be the best solution? Elsa starts crying and screaming that she'll be killed anyway. She'd laugh and ask her to calm down, saying they're just kidding. This isn't real. Roshuru says she understands that if Raitia finds out Elsa is alive, she will definitely attack them. But he asks if they give up his plans, and if that happens, Yuki says he doesn't care much. Even if they go back on the word, all he needs is a new contract to get the dungeon completely ready. He just needs about 20 to 23 days, and with the looting he has today, that's more than enough for him. The old man is impressed by his achievements in such a short time. He says he understood you and they'll follow your plan, however. There is one more thing. Roshuru asks Yuki if he could hide all traces of Elsa's existence. Elsa twitches. Confused, Roshuru leans over and says he doesn't deserve to be a father. But in the face of the choice between the lives of his people and that of his daughter, he is still forced to choose bitterly the first. He says you must look like a heartless person. Yuki says that's not true. His decisions, being a king who always cares about his people, earned Yuki's respect. Yuki turns to King Roshuru and says that as long as he keeps his word, he swears on his life that he will protect the princess Elsa with all her strength. Seraria asks Yuki what happened, saying it doesn't look like him. Deep down, Elsa is happy. Thanks to Yuki, Yuki tells the king that, in the meantime, he will surely attract the person responsible for everything that is happening in Roshuru. He adds, with a smile, that there is something in which he will need the help of the king. At that moment, the soldiers scream horrified at Minister Roval. He asks why he made so much noise. The soldier controls his breath and says His Majesty and Princess were killed. He orders the soldier to return quickly to the castle and inform him that he will arrive as soon as he can. The soldier obeys and goes galloping with his horse. Another man next to Roval says with an ironic smile that Russia's kingdom will definitely end up in their hands. He smooths his mustache and says That's right. Now, all we can do is wait for Ritia to get rid of Elsa, he says, with joy that they will certainly be rewarded for it. This country will be the most suitable prize. The soldiers in the dungeon listen to the conversation, and one of the subordinates asks Roval what he will do with the soldiers trapped there. He says they're no longer useful to him. Either way, they won't get out alive. Soldiers watch horrified. Yuki asks Mr. Captain Alex what he thinks now. He, embarrassed, asks you not to say anything. It would be turned to the brave soldiers and shouts that they saw the truth. And if they believe it, then they will drop their weapons and surrender it. Soldiers exclaim joyfully and throw their weapons to the ground. At that moment, Roval pretends to enter the king's chambers with great bitterness and shouts to his king and Princess Arya. The soldier asks military leader Roll to calm down, and with tears, he asks how he can remain calm in such a situation. King Rashur lies in a coffin surrounded by flowers. Roval is shaking, crying, and saying that can't be true. He throws himself over the coffin and begs the soldiers forgiveness. Could you give him a minute? Because he wants to say goodbye to His Majesty. As soon as the soldier retreats, tears cease, and a smile appears. He says everything is going as planned. State aloud that now the contract with Right has been fulfilled. Rashur's royal family no longer exists. He claims that from this moment on, he will be the rightful ruler. But then Rashur suddenly rises and crosses the minister with his sword. He says it looks like he's starting to grow old, since he hasn't killed a man like Roval before. He gets shocked and doesn't understand. The realization comes when you see your hand on the ground, not on your shoulder. A loud scream is heard. Rashur commands the soldiers not to let him die. Arya gets up and says she didn't even have a chance to show off. Rashur tells her not to worry about it. He claims that the main part of the show is about to begin. Then, a soldier comes in and reports an emergency. They found Rowan's subordinates in his army. Rashur thinks and says that he is not surprised, but that it should not be such a serious matter to the point of causing panic. The soldier also adds on Elsa that she was pierced by a sword. He screams that she's dying. At this moment, the Holy Virgin Luria is on horseback. She sees Seraria. She begs the Holy Virgin to save Elsa. The soldier asks her to wait. The soldier wants to warn you that maidenly theory is forbidden to do so. Seraria yells at him that she's a close friend of theirs. She adds that besides, they can no longer help her in any way. The soldier begins to cry for loss, but then the Holy Virgin Luria takes over and says they will try. She uses the highest cure. As a result, she can live at different times. People's wounds stop hurting. Someone's fever goes back to normal, and an old man's back pain goes away. The soldier is surprised. So that is what the power of the Holy Virgin is. But Elsa still does not regain consciousness. Seraria watches and cares. She tells Luria she's using too much power. If she goes on, she might faint. Luria continues and says with effort that Elsa is like a sister to her. She can't let her die. After those words, Luria faints. At this moment, negotiations are taking place with the king of Roshor. A subordinate says that, according to Roval's confession, everything that happened was part of Ritia's plan. They need to join Garut and declare war against Ritia. Another screams to stop talking nonsense. Garut will definitely join Ritia. Another, wearing glasses, shouts that justice is on their side. They must make them pay for everything they've done to Elia. The king shouts for everyone to calm down. War would only make your people suffer, but it wouldn't solve anything. They don't understand and ask what they should do then, so Seraria runs to them. Everyone's quiet, IDB asking if they could hear what she has to say. The horrified man asks how she escaped. They start screaming that she's not allowed to be there. The king tells everyone to calm down again. He says Luria is Elsa's friend. Besides, he heard she used all her powers to save Elsa. He asks severely if they won't at least give him a chance to explain himself. Luria remembers Yuki's words, that she should simply remember to wisely transfer responsibility to someone else. Luria begins to say that everything that has happened is part of the plan of the Demon Lord. Everyone listens attentively, but with this information, they are blown away. They yell at her, no way she can fool them with such a stupid story. They agree with this thesis and shout that this is humiliating. Seraria intervenes and asks if they could just shut up. If all this was part of Rita's plan, then why did you let the Holy Maiden come here alone? She says, reprimanding, that she even lamented Elsa's death, if all this is just a game to fool them. Shall execute it herself. Everyone suddenly goes silent. The king says he believes there is reason to believe them. He brings men to tears, saying that everything is for the good of Elsa, his unhappy daughter, and for the good of the people of the kingdom. At that moment in the dungeon, Elsa asks Yuki if she was wondering if it was really necessary to fake her death. Yuki says Reiter's primary goal would not be achieved until his death was confirmed. She asks why then blame everything on the Demon Lord. Yuki replies that if responsibility were transferred to someone else, or even to the kingdom, war would be inevitable. Elsa says it could attract his attention. Yuki says the Demon Lord has nothing to do with it. They just use it as an excuse, and nobody seems to care. So they just give him the responsibility. If it can save many lives, then it's the right thing to do. Elsa asks, how is that even possible? That will only come out in the back. Why don't they simply gather their troops and, in the name of justice, force Ritia to confess her crimes? Was Ritia the main reason for all this? When Elsa hears this Yuki question, she freezes. He says it wasn't like that. It was her. Yuki says she was used as easily as a holy maiden. He asks if she even understands it. Oriel defends her and asks what he's talking about, since Elsa saved countless lives. Yuki then asks if this will make any difference in the current situation. He tells her to compare the number of people she saved with the number that will die in the war. Which one is higher? Oriel is also silent. Yuki says she understands how she feels now, but she shouldn't think of herself as an omen of destruction. She's just a reason to start this war and nothing else. He says that if she hadn't become a holy virgin, people would still admire Luria. Roval wouldn't have invented this bizarre scheme. Elsa asks him to stop. But Yuki continues to say that Mobu and his friends would still live happily with their families, and Rosher's royal family would not be attacked. Elsa, horrified, starts sobbing and screaming in denial. Oriel's furious. How can he say something like that to Elsa? Yuki says he's just answering her questions. Elsa, exhausted, says she doesn't know what else to do now, that horrors await her in the future. She thought that if she became a holy virgin, it would be the most beautiful dream come true. Yuki says that maybe that's why she managed to help everyone by giving everything of herself. He claims it's true that her situation caused some unfortunate events, but it also saved many lives. Yuki puts her hand on Elsa's head and asks her to remain the holy maiden she dreamed she was. Do it for the sake of the people who believed in your title. No matter what happens, she saved many. He asks who she thinks is most unhappy to suffer from all this. Elsa suggests the Demon Lord, but Yuki bows his head, tired and angry with Elsa's foolish words. He says it affected more those who live there. Elsa is surprised and says it makes sense, but asks if he understands how many people will become subordinates after that. Elsa looks away and says all she can do now is pay with her own life. Yuki angrily asks her to stop talking so much nonsense. He asks if she remembers what he tried to build in this dungeon. Elsa replies that they were towns and villages. At this moment, they are both surprised to realize what he intends to do. Yuki says they're lucky there's human trafficking happening now. They can ask the king to pay everyone's ransom. Elsa asks if Hell really forced them to work for him. Yuki gets outraged and asks what kind of bad person she thinks he is. He says Hell, give them the job of gods in a way, and so they can still live their own life. Elsa happily says that this means that the servants will live a happy life. Yuki says he doesn't know if he can do it, but it's worth a try. He delivers something to the girl and says he's still new to this kind of thing, so he's gonna let Elsa administers the dungeon for him. He gives her an immigration plan for the dungeon and says he can now try to do what her father has done all these years. He says that as a first chance, Mobu and his friends will buy all these beaver men for them.